You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, with Week 2 officially upon us, Thursday Night Football's matchup in the books as the Green Bay Packers, with a dominant Week 2 victory, now moving to 2-0 on the season. We are making predictions going into this Sunday's week number 2. We got plenty of action, plenty of games to dive into. Coming off a 13-3 week number 1. Took an L on the chin, though, last night as I convinced myself that the Washington Commanders were going to be able to take down the Green Bay Packers at home. Shame on me, but plenty of games to discuss and get into and make up for it. So I invite you all, as always, to comment down below. Let me hear from you all. Thoughts, opinions on this week's matchups. Agree, disagree, maybe make some selections along with me as we go through the week. And as always, a reminder, this is not gambling advice. We don't place bets here. I don't look at spreads, money. I don't look at any of that stuff. I'm here to talk football with NFL fans, with football fans here. So if that's not your cup of tea, that's fine. But that is what we're doing here. This is all just for a good time to be able to talk with you all and each other. That being said, first game we're going to take a look at here. We got the Browns going into Baltimore to take on the Ravens. And I see this game kind of going one of two ways. It's either going to be that Baltimore comes in and they just gave it everything they got. And maybe they're a little bit flat against a division rival Cleveland team that every single year seems to find a way to keep things pretty close with Baltimore, depending on the time of season and just where they are in that year. But also, there's the opportunity that maybe Baltimore comes in and they are just ready to punch somebody in the mouth because they're upset about last week. The end result of that game probably ends up with Baltimore winning either way, but I could see like a scenario where just Baltimore's a little gas coming off from that Sunday Night Football matchup and maybe things are closer than they'd like it to be. Obviously, the potential of an upset is always there for Cleveland, but that's just kind of how I see it playing out. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, absolute menace of a combination from quarterback to running back here, racking up 239 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns against Buffalo. I will say this. Cleveland, for what it's worth, held Chase Brown to just 43 yards last week, and the yards per attempt number was very, very low. But for what it's worth, Cleveland has a good defensive front, and I do think that they maybe could find success in at least slowing down Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. However, yes, you got a Myles Garrett. Yes, you have a first-round selection in a Mason Graham. You went and you drafted Carson Schwarzenegger as well to help shore up the linebacking room. You could point at a guy like Isaiah McGuire, who had a pretty good game himself last week, working opposite of Myles Garrett there. Like, I like the defensive line that they have brewing over there in Cleveland, but this is a very tough matchup here as Derrick Henry seems very intent on running through people's existence, never mind just running into the end zone. And with the conversation coming regarding just how easy it is to tackle Derrick Henry and Browns players just trying to say that, it's not that hard at all, a little bit worried with the motivation that a guy like a Derrick Henry could have potentially coming into this one here. I will say, though, on Cleveland's side of things, you have Joe Flacco coming home to Baltimore, take on his former team. This should be a very fun and interesting just moment altogether and just game to watch for somebody like Flacco going up against his former team. Flacco at this stage is like the definition of high risk, high reward. And you got that high reward last week. You saw 290 yards through the air, a couple of interceptions, but both were tipped. And wildly enough, like watching them back when I was looking through tape, it was interesting to see just how similar both of the interceptions were. There was a moment as I flipped from the first one to the second one where I was like, wait, did I just see the same thing again from a different angle? Like, what's going on here? So, but overall, very good game from Joe Flacco. That being said, the Ravens defense let up 394 yards to Josh Allen last week and a couple of passing touchdowns as well through the air. I'm not saying that Joe Flacco is Josh Allen and that the Ravens could be doomed to letting up numbers like that again, but we have seen Joe Flacco find success, and seems like a weird common occurrence now where Baltimore's pass defense struggles early in the year and then finds its way like halfway through the season. So this is that early portion of the year where maybe Baltimore comes in, they let a little bit get by Joe Flacco, so just don't be surprised if you find Joe Flacco moving the football fairly effectively through the air. It's one of those things that just seems to happen early in the season for Baltimore. If they can just get after Joe Flacco and force him into mistakes, like I said, high risk, high reward style of play from Flacco at this point in his career. He is kind of a statue in the pocket at his age as well. You can force him into bad throws and making poor decisions. So it's all about getting pressure. It's all about making Joe Flacco uncomfortable. And I definitely think Baltimore is capable of doing so, which is why I have the Ravens winning this matchup. I like them them. I like them winning handedly as well. I have them winning 30-17. Strong statement from a Baltimore team that's coming off of a Sunday Night Football loss that I'm sure that they would just kind of like to wipe the nasty taste out of their mouth and move on from there. So we'll see what happens. Again, chance it could be close. Depends on how much they left in the tank coming out of that wild Sunday Night Football clash, but I do like Baltimore handedly here. The next game we'll take a look at an AFC matchup between two teams that are kind of in a position where I feel like you could ask the same question about them. I look at Jacksonville and I look at Cincinnati and I kind of go, what exactly are you? Jacksonville, obviously with a new head coach, new system, but still Trevor Lawrence at the helm, some new pieces on the offense. They looked very good last week. I would say one of the most balanced performances we've seen from a Jacksonville Jaguar offense in quite some time. 32 runs, 31 passing attempts, 200 yards on the ground, 178 through the air. Very balanced and just well-oiled machine when it came to moving the football, especially when you consider like the rain, the weather delay and everything that they dealt with over there in Jacksonville. Travis Etienne played so well. Tank Bigsby got traded this week because of it. Probably going to see a lot more of Tootin coming out of the backfield as well. I think for me, though, the one thing I really want to see from them in this game is to just challenge what is a weaker secondary, at least most people would say, regarding Cincinnati, and just try to get the ball into Brian Thomas Jr.'s hands. They struggled with it last week. He was 1 for 7 on targets coming his way, plus like the 9-yard end around that he ended up scoring a touchdown on. Keep the play simple. Keep them quick to Brian Thomas Jr. I understand he was one of the biggest deep threats in the NFL as a rookie last season, and you want to go big, go home with him, but at the same time, sometimes keeping it simple, getting the ball very quickly into the hands of your top playmaker, and just allowing him to do just that, make a play with the ball in his hands, is a lot better of a decision than trying to make those big splash plays. I just feel like it's one of those things where if you keep it simple, Trevor Lawrence, good quarterback, can get the ball out of his hands well, you put it in the playmaker's hands, and you should be good. So I'll be interested to see how that works itself out. But Jacksonville, as it currently stands right now, impressive coming out of week 1. And then Cincinnati, in a different situation where defensively they hung on for a long portion of that game against Cleveland. They found themselves in some situations where, honestly, there was a good chance Cleveland could have walked away with a win if things broke Cleveland's way. So I am a little bit concerned about Cincinnati here. The offense obviously not looking great, but there's too much talent in Cincinnati to bank on that happening again in my eyes. And I still don't really know what this Jacksonville Jaguars defense is. Like, yes, they looked good against a Carolina Panthers team that went through ups and downs last year and finished somewhat strong, but they were one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL last season. And I know a lot of that doesn't really apply because this, again, new regime as far as coaching is concerned. They're running things differently. So that doesn't necessarily mean a ton. And we saw changes in the secondary, but we don't necessarily know exactly what they are. But I do know that they still have guys like Josh Hines-Allen and, of course, Trayvon Walker coming off the edge, who are one of my favorite pass rushing duos in the NFL. And coming off of 12 combined pressures last week, if they can just get home and get after Joe Burrow, you have a weaker offensive line in Cincinnati that has just constantly struggled to find a way to build into a unit that can protect Joe Burrow consistently. And now you look at the fact that they lost Lucas Patrick in last week's matchup. It's a bit of a weak point for them. Joe Burrow was sacked 3 times last week as well. I think there is an opportunity there that presents itself a way of Jacksonville pulling off the upset here on the road in Cincinnati, but I do like the Bengals. This one's kind of a coin flip for me, and I have the Bengals winning 23-21, and I think that's how close it is in my head. Like, this is like one of those, maybe Cincinnati's down, kicks a field goal to win it type things, or maybe just like, you hang on by like the skin of your teeth again. I could see Jacksonville really giving Cincinnati a tough time here, but I feel like this offense that spent all preseason trying to get itself ready and then not looking nearly as good as anyone hoped it would in week number 1, despite getting all the opportunities to kind of get into a rhythm prior to the regular season. You'd hope that now with another week in the books, after getting some real game action, that you have yourself a much better opportunity of more offensive output and a better game overall. So I'll take Cincinnati 23-21. There's a trash truck outside. 23-21. And we'll get the W for Cincy. All right, diving into game number 3, there was just a trash truck blowing its horn outside my window. I don't know if you guys heard that. If you did, my apologies. But we've got Giants and Cowboys on deck next to dive into here. NFC East clash between two 0-1 teams. Tough day offensively for New York against the Commanders last week. The O-line has got to do better, and that's one of the big kind of pain points that the Giants needed to work on this past offseason, and we'll see how it fares over the duration of the year, but allowing 22 pressures and 2 sacks in week number 1, the 22 pressures being the second most of week 1 altogether. Not exactly the most inspiring thing in the world. I will say that you're going up against the Dallas Cowboys defensive line that obviously has a lot up in the air right now as they continue to work around the departure of Micah Parsons, obviously Kenny Clark coming into the fold here. And then there's also reports of Jadeveon Clowney visiting the team, and whether or not he winds up joining is definitely something worth keeping an eye on, and whether or not he even ends up playing this week, if he was to join this late into the week, I don't think is really likely, so not something to worry about, I would say, too much, unless they're just going to go, hey, get out there and just get after the quarterback, kind of try to stop a run, set the edge if you can, sort of thing. That'd be crazy, but we've seen crazier things. That being said, I think just trying to get the ball going on the ground is probably key for the Giants here. I'm not super high on what this Giants offense could potentially be now after seeing it in week number 1, and I think at least getting things going on the ground could be big for New York in the long run. But when you look at just 32 yards on the ground off of 15 carries for the running backs, not the greatest thing in the world. So trying to take it to this defensive front in Dallas is going to be key for the offensive line in New York and just finding success offensively as a whole. Then when you flip it over to the other side, Dallas, I think the passing game looked like the passing game. Obviously, we got a handful of drops from CeeDee Lamb that you wonder, had he made those catches, what that game winds up looking when the final whistle blows. But Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders had some pretty solid success on the ground as a 1-2 punch combo, racking up 107 yards on the ground as a tandem. So when you look at the defensive front in New York and all the hype that was kind of built up around it, they kind of struggled a bit this past week. 133 combined rushing yards from Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Austin Eckler, and Jeremy McNichols. Dallas obviously is going to lean on the arm of Dak Prescott. It's just what they do, and obviously with CeeDee Lamb and going out and getting George Pickens, they're going to throw the football first, but I feel like everyone was raising their eyebrows a little bit, seeing just how well the Dallas Cowboys were able to run the football. And sure, you can point to the fact that Jalen Carter wasn't on the football field, and maybe that helped them out, yes. But as it currently stands right now, Giants' run defense has not looked great. Could be another long week if Dallas decides to pound the rock again, but I do think that the big concern right now is just winning at the line of scrimmage for New York, and I don't quite know if they're going to be able to do so. So I think I'm leaning Cowboys on this one here. I think we see a few more points from the Giants than they did in week number 1, but I'm starting to get a little bit worried about what this quarterback situation actually is, with just how Brian Daboll seemed non-committal until a little bit later than you would have liked him to be about who the quarterback was going to be in week number 2. Took him a day or two, I believe, to actually make the confirmation of, yes, it's Russell Wilson. So give me Dallas 26-16. I think it could be a little bit tighter. Giants do like to keep it close with the Cowboys from time to time, but I do like the Cowboys here. I just think that they're overall, as it currently stands, they look like they're in a little bit of a better spot with how well they took it to the Philadelphia Eagles in week number 1. Now we'll shift our focus and take a look at an NFC North clash between the Chicago Bears and Detroit Lions as Ben Johnson makes his exciting return to Detroit, as both teams walked away 0-1 in week number 1 without the other together. Now, Detroit's offense, very flat against Green Bay's defense last week, and now after seeing how Green Bay played on Thursday Night Football, maybe that has a little bit more to do with just how good Green Bay's defense might actually be this season, as opposed to it being an indictment on what the offense is over in Detroit. It wasn't until the fourth quarter that Chicago's defense really let anything up in that first matchup of the week for them. J.J. McCarthy was sacked 3 times. He threw the pick 6. There was a lot of pressure coming from that defensive line, and the way I see it right now, as the Detroit Lions try to figure out what their unit's supposed to look like, because they lost some key contributors along that offensive line themselves. Not only did they lose coordinators, but they lost key players as well, especially up front. If they can't open up running lanes for their running backs again, and Chicago finds the success that they did against Minnesota once again, Jared Goff was pressured 12 times and sacked 4 times last week. I don't think that that's an unrealistic possibility for the Chicago Bears in the way they looked against Minnesota. So entire operation needs to be better for Detroit, but the offensive line's definitely a concern. It was something that I talked about in the lead up to the series, and I know a lot of people other were as well. It's just one of those things where if you can't get it going up front, it'll stall out your entire offense. And through 1 week so far, not great results from a newly reconstructed unit after the departure of some key pieces on that offensive line for Detroit. Meanwhile, looking at Chicago, one thing I really want to see from them, especially in this game here, just to really help out Caleb Williams, is speed up that passing game and focus a little bit more on just getting the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands really quick. I went ahead and just kind of looked at some numbers from 2024. When you look at Caleb Williams and how he played during his rookie season, and I understand it's obviously not the same offense, not the same thing, but just I feel like the numbers as a whole do say something. You look at his advanced passing numbers from NFL Pro. When he was completing short passes, under 10 yards, so 9 and less, 73.7% completion rate. From there, when you start dropping or raising that number for how long he held onto the football and, of course, how far the air yards were actually being traveled, for intermediate passes anywhere from 10 to 19 yards through the air, that number drops to 46.2%. And then from there to 23.5% on deep passes, which is 20-plus air yards. Now you go, well, naturally, the number is supposed to get lower as you try to complete more difficult throws further down the football field. The problem is that on intermediate passes, only 3 QBs were worse than Caleb Williams last season, and then deep passes, only 2 QBs were worse. So I think right now, and I also feel like from the few games that I got to catch of Chicago in full last season, and I really go back to like when Chicago played Indianapolis, it feels like if you just keep the passing game quick, get it into the playmaker's hands, and you don't force Caleb Williams to have to be the Superman every single play, you can find a lot of success with what he's able to do. So I really want to see that passing game quick. On top of that, the O-line's clearly trying to find itself and works out some kinks still, considering there's 3 new faces on the O-line. I think that's fair to allow that to be the case. 15 pressures allowed last week is obviously not ideal. So just Ben Johnson dialing up some just quick, easy plays. Get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands. Let his decisions be quick. Don't force him to think too much, and just let him play the game. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see from them, and it's something that I think, especially going up against Detroit, who has a secondary that is still kind of questionable at this current stage right now, it might benefit them. That being said, if they're able to do that, I think Chicago can go into Detroit and get the win, and this will be one of my upset picks for the week here in Detroit. Something tells me the Bears can get the job done, and Ben Johnson earns himself a big W returning home to his former team. So give me the Bears 21-17, defensive bit of standoff there, but I do think the Bears could get the job done. Now we'll take a look at the Patriots and Dolphins. This is that black game that I feel like you get each and every single week. There's always like 1 or 2 where you wish you didn't have to pick them, but you do. Both these teams coming off of ugly losses in their own way, but Tua Tagovailoa is 7-0 against the New England Patriots all-time in his career. New England's defense is in a bit of a tough way. Defensive coordinator Terrell Williams sounds like he's not going to be available for this game, and he's going to be taking some time away from the team again for another health issue. Hoping the best for him. But then also Christian Gonzalez not practicing this week for the most part, and I believe there isn't a practice report out at the time of this recording for Friday, so I don't know if he missed, but I'm going to assume he did not practice as well, and if he did, it's probably in some limited capacity at best. So he's probably not playing in Miami. You also couple with the fact that they're going down to Miami, always very hot, very humid, and the fact that he's dealing with a hamstring right now, dehydration and just extreme heat and that sort of thing, dealing with a hammy, you probably don't want Christian Gonzalez's return to be in Miami. Like, there's a very real weather factor to this game that if I'm the Patriots, I'm heavily considering going out to Miami, where your team historically typically struggles as well because they're not from that climate and it's an extremely different place than New England. On top of that, I mean, you have the injuries that have just kind of mounting on both sides of the football. There is now conversation that Morgan Moses might potentially not be available for the Patriots going into this game as well. Morgan Moses being the right tackle for the Patriots. And respectfully, if he's not available, I have some serious concern about not only what this defense could look like against what is still at least a talented group of guys in Miami, but also just how this offensive line can hold up. You have a rookie left tackle and left guard, and a center who has not been great as far as pass protection has concerned him for the last couple of years. I am a bit worried. You couple that with the fact that this defense did not look great last week. Yeah, they made some plays when it mattered most as the Raiders got closer to the end zone, but they still got carved up for 362 yards passing. There is a lot of yuck coming out of the Patriots, and it's like I want to just easily fade them here. But then they're playing the Miami Dolphins. And Obviously, all eyes are going to be on Tua this week and how he handles himself in this game here. The Colts came out just absolutely swinging and shocked them, completely disrupting the rhythm that the offense in Miami typically needs to fall into to really operate at a high level. And, I mean, you look at the run game being key for this one here. I don't want Miami to be too one-dimensional and just lean on Tua and try to attack a secondary that's missing a key guy like a Christian Gonzalez. Like, Mike McDaniel landed the gig he got for how elaborate like his run game schemes were. And that's something that I think Miami needs to lean back into. You obviously have Devon Achane, talented running back, but you also got a guy in Ollie Gordon III who I really feel like could be good for this system if he can carve out a role. So I just think trying to get things going on the ground is key for Miami in this one here. Now, New England did a solid job stopping the run last week against Las Vegas. 46 yards on 2.1 yards per attempt, holding the running backs down to. So if Miami can just get something going on the ground, find that rhythm early, force the defense to be honest with you, you can get those quick passes off that Tua is known for. Nobody gets the ball out faster than Tua does when he's rocking and rolling. So there is a chance that maybe the Dolphins broke last week, and it sounds like things are really shaky out in Miami right now, but it's not pretty by any means for the Patriots. Their roster is still clearly far lesser than a lot of teams in the NFL as it currently stands, and this is a coin flip. And historically, Patriots do not get the job done in Miami, and that's kind of what I'm leaning towards right now. And now with the concern that Morgan Moses might not be able to play, and you're starting a 7th-round pick at right tackle and Marcus Bryant, I think I'm going to go with the Dolphins here and make it like a 20-17 kind of slugfest sort of thing. This is a game I wish I didn't have to pick, but here we are picking it. I'll just take the home team and the team that is historically pulling out wins against the team that travels from the Northeast down this early in the season. So I'll just take Miami here. Next game we'll take a look at, we have the 49ers and Saints. And we just talked about a Blech game. Well, this is another one of those. With New Orleans, in my eyes, only winning a handful of games this season. Prior to all the injury news coming out, I thought this was going to be an easy pick for me. But now, no Mac Jones, no George Kittle, no Mac Jones. There's no Brock Purdy, which means there will be Mac Jones. Excuse me, flipping the names there. Purdy's going to be out for about 2 to 5 weeks. George Kittle is out the next 3 to 5. And Mac Jones, 2024 numbers, if we just want to look at his most recent body of work last season, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a 65% completion rate. His quarterback record as a starter the last 2 seasons is a whopping 4-14. And San Francisco's offense was already kind of tough sledding against Seattle. So, there is a lot to be worried about with this 49ers team, and it's only week 2 of this season. I don't know what to make of this offense right now. You still have guys that you can count on to make plays. You have a Christian McCaffrey. You have a Ricky Pearsall. Juwan Jennings sounds like he should be able to go, and I think if he's able to go, that'll be huge for this offense. But for what it's worth, New Orleans gave Arizona a hell of a fight last week. I personally didn't think that New Orleans was going to be able to hang around like that. I'm not saying that Arizona is some really good football team and that they're going to be world beaters this season, but I didn't expect them to be able to hang around with Arizona the way they did, coming down to the literal wire in that game. And New Orleans, the way that you could, get after them is just lean into Christian McCaffrey. He is a superb talent, a superb athlete, one of the best at what he does when he's healthy and on the football field. New Orleans gave up 108 yards to the running backs in Arizona last week, that included that 52-yard run by Trey Benson. So I think if you're San Francisco, you are leaning into Christian McCaffrey on this one here. This is one of those 30 touches coming out of the backfield type of games where you kind of have to look at him and go, listen, it's Mac Jones starting this week. You're going to need to play quarterback, and you're probably seeing the ball more than he is. So you're handing off the ball a lot to Christian McCaffrey in this one here. And I think just trying to keep the passing game very quick, easy, and simple. And if there's someone that you could rely on for that, I think it's Kyle Shanahan. So I am a bit worried, especially going into New Orleans for this game. I don't even really have a score for this because I don't know how the end result for this is even really going to look. But I do like the 49ers squeaking out an impossible win. If this ends up being a 16-13 yuck fest, I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, maybe the offenses find something and surprise us. But I like San Francisco's defense enough, especially after what we saw from last week. And I think that there are still some good young players and vets on the defensive side in New Orleans that you're going up against Mac Jones. The score for this ends up being low, and you get something of those, like both teams finish with their points somewhere in the teens, but I have the 49ers just edging them out by a hair in New Orleans. So give me San Fran, and this is probably one of the uglier games of the week that you probably won't see too often on Red Zone. And now I know I'm saying that, and that means that it's going to be the complete opposite, and this will be like a 30-30 slugfest kind of thing, but that's just kind of how I see it. The next game, though, an exciting one, especially because of their performance last week. The Bills taking on the Jets, and this one's in New York. This is an excellent test for the Jets to really just kind of like legitimize themselves in the AFC. The Jets showed some clear growing pains last week as they're learning Aaron Glenn's defense and trying to get acclimated. Josh Allen, obviously last week, having a hell of a performance with the near 400 yards and 2 touchdowns we had mentioned previously, talking earlier. I will say that this is one of those games where you're probably going to see a lot of points. The Bills' defense has been hit or miss depending on the point in time of the season for the last few years, and seeing the way Baltimore kind of took it to them on the ground does concern me a little bit, and we'll get into that in a second here. But I think for Buffalo offensively, lean into Keon Coleman. It felt like he really started to see the ball a lot later in the football game, and he came up and made some massive plays, including catching a tipped touchdown pass late in the game to really get things close in that Sunday Night Football matchup against Baltimore. So I really want to see how they involve Keon Coleman, and my assumption would be, with him being their number one guy and forcing him the football more, you're going to see Sauce Gardner on top of him. How he fares in a matchup against one of the top corners in the NFL is certainly going to be a matchup to watch there. Sauce spent basically all of last game. It was about 90% of the snaps, or the routes run, that was a tongue twister there. The routes run, that DK Metcalf ran. 30 of his 33 that he ran were covered by Sauce Gardner as he's shadowing the number ones of every football team he is now going up against. It should be a fun and interesting battle. But for the Bills defensively, I mean, the Jets and Justin Fields kind of present the same problem that they saw last week. Buffalo obviously got absolutely torched on the ground to the tune of 183 yards, to the tune of 239 yards. The Jets themselves on Pittsburgh put up 183 yards on the ground as well. Justin Fields accounted for nearly 50. You got over 100 from Breece Hall. And there's no Ed Oliver in this game as well. So you're missing a key guy on the interior of that defensive line. I do think that this is another high-scoring affair. I think the Jets might be able to go shot for shot for them as well. This feels like we might be seeing a turning point for at least offensive football in New York, but I'm a little bit concerned because the defensive performance we got from the Jets last week reminds me of defensive performances from the Lions when they were just letting teams put up 20 some odd, near 30 some odd points, but their offense was so potent and so able to score that it wasn't necessarily the biggest deal in the world. So I think this is a high scoring affair. I do like Buffalo, though, going into New York, getting the job done and winning 31-27. A lot of points, should be a fun one. Next, we'll go ahead, we'll take ourselves a look at a Super Bowl 40 rematch. I always love seeing these two match up here because Super Bowl 40 is, and this will tell you, I guess, like how young or old I am, depending on the age of the person who is listening to me talk right now. But Super Bowl 40 rematch, to me, the way I always see this whenever this pops up is it reminds me of when I was first getting into football as a really young kid. Super Bowl 40, I believe I was in like 6th or 7th grade, and that's where like my NFL fandom was kind of starting to flourish. So whatever that was, like 2008 or something along those lines. Every time I see this one pop up, that was like the first Super Bowl I actively remember watching like in full as a kid. I went to like some Super Bowl party or something like that with my family, obviously. And so that's just the one that kind of sticks in my memory the most. Like to be completely upfront, like growing up in New England, I don't even really remember the early dynasty of the New England Patriots. Like I've seen it. I have watched it now as an adult, but I don't have the fond childhood memories of it because I was pretty young when that was all going on. That's like 2001. Was that 1, 3, and 4? Like, I mean, talk about barely even having a consciousness at that point. I was like maybe like 5, 6, 7, 8, something along those lines. And like Super Bowl 40 was the first one that I really remember. So that all being said, genesis of Ethan and his football fandom here. Seahawks offense last week, extremely flat going against San Francisco. And I've got to say, Pittsburgh's defense surprised me. They allowed a lot to happen to them. And while Sam Darnold is still semi of a mobile quarterback, I think this is probably going to be a little bit of a better game for Pittsburgh. And with them managing 13 pressures and a sack on Justin Fields last week, I think those numbers could elevate a little bit here, with Sam Darnold being a little bit more of a traditional pocket passer when comparing him to Justin Fields. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm aware Sam Darnold is a mobile guy and he can move with his legs, but that's not what I first think of when I think of Sam Darnold, as opposed to when you think of Justin Fields as a quarterback. Fields did a really good job escaping them. I think that could be something that ends up being a problem for Sam Darnold. And also Pittsburgh, known for their just wildly exotic style of blitzing and the way they do things over there. If their defense can shut things down, this could be a problem. I'm not, and I feel like I'm going to say this every week, but I've got to make it clear, like, I'm not a Sam Darnold believer. I don't think it was the right move for Seattle, and I'm sorry, Seahawks fans, because I did not want to see that for you, especially in this new Mike Macdonald era where the defensive side of things looks really good in Seattle, and now it feels like you're going to be struggling with like a good defense and an offense that just can't find its way. So that'll definitely be like where my eyes are first going to be focused on the most. But then also just Aaron Rodgers and how he handles the Seattle defense. Because like I mentioned, Seattle gave Brock Purdy a hell of a time last week. Like, it was not an easy game for the 49ers to pull out. They picked him off a couple of times. And then when you look at what happened to Aaron Rodgers last week in that win, he was sacked 4 times, pressured 9 times. And this is one of those games where if Seattle has so much talent, especially on the defensive front, like if they can get home and disrupt Aaron Rodgers, that is how you beat him. If you're knocking him down, you're taking him to the ground, you're making him uncomfortable, that's quite simply how you beat him. Now, it's easier said than done, but if you can disrupt the rhythm he gets into, you can beat him. I don't know about this Seahawks offense right now. I'm worried about their ability to be able to run the football against the Steelers as well. I'm like juggling names here. I'm really concerned on that front. So I like Pittsburgh in this one, especially being in Pittsburgh as well, like the homecoming, I guess, for Aaron Rodgers as well. I'll take the Steelers on this one, 27-20. This is one of those where I feel like the score ends up being lower and it feels like a more classic Pittsburgh Steelers type game. Because again, Seahawks defense is a good one. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe if you're like an over/under person, if the under ends up hitting in this game here, something along those lines. I really do like a lower scoring affair though, with Pittsburgh maybe just having a little more in the tank to work with. I cannot get past Sam Darnold as quarterback in Seattle. I cannot. Next game we'll look at, we got ourselves Rams and Titans, and I've got to say, tough back-to-back draw to kick off your NFL career if you are Cam Ward. You face Denver's defense week number 1, who could quite possibly have the absolute best pass rush in the NFL this season, as they led the league in sacks coming out of week 1 with 6. And then on top of that, you have Sean McVay and an always well-coached Rams defense that has a really good defensive front full of young guys that are just chomping at the bit to get after the quarterback. So not a great pull. Now, in Tennessee's favor, the Rams offensive line is definitely something to keep an eye on. As of recording right now, it's still up in the air. Rob Havenstein, Kevin Dotson, and Steve Avila are all currently up in the air for their availability in week number 2. Matthew Stafford was sacked 3 times and pressured 10 times in last week's game, and I would assume that number rises a bit if they're not going to be in the fold. And the way I see it right now, Tennessee only managed a sack and 8 pressures versus Denver, but with Jeffrey Simmons leading the way over there up front, and again, a battered Rams offensive line, I would not be surprised if maybe those numbers tick up a little bit going in this game here. Tennessee also, there's a good chance if they're getting after the quarterback, they're making Matthew Stafford uncomfortable, they could force him into a bad throw or two. Tennessee took the ball away 4 times last week, so Tennessee's defense could be a good threat. And for what it's worth, last week, the Rams only put up 14 points against another really good defense in Houston. So if Tennessee's defense is what we saw in week number 1, and that's a good unit that can force teams into making turnovers, this could be a very tight game. On the flip side for Tennessee, I would just love to see them find a way to run the football here. I will say this, Nick Chubb finding solid success last week, kind of a surprise to me. I didn't really know what to make of that as him being the starter for the Texans here, but 13 carries, 60 yards, 4.6 yards per attempt, not a bad showing. And Cam Ward, he showed a ton of fight in last week's matchup, and I feel like if you can just get him a steady ground game and you can attack LA the way that Houston did, just maybe commit to running the football a little bit more, you might find yourself in a much better position in this upcoming matchup here. Tony Pollard had 18 carries for 60 yards last season, and Denver's a tough defensive front. They're going to be a tough team to run the football against. They were a great run defense last year. Looks like they're going to be a great run defense again this year. So, I mean, no harm, no foul there, averaging 3.3 yards attempt for him. But if you can just alleviate the necessity for Cam Ward to have to throw the football all the time, you could put yourself in a much better spot. Like, lean on your defense, lean on the ground game. Don't force everything on Cam Ward's shoulders. And Cam Ward was just absolutely battling through it, man. I mean, 5 drops, leading the league in drops was Tennessee last week with those 5, and it felt like 3 of them came on the final drive of the game. Like, they had the camera shot that panned over to his dad in the crowd. Like, yeah, absolutely, man. Everyone was feeling that way watching Tennessee. If you were either rooting for Tennessee or just me, I have no dog in the fight, and I was just watching Tennessee, and I was like, oh my God. Like, I even picked Denver to win that game, and I'm watching that, and I'm like, come on, man. Like, give this guy a break. Like, at least let him go down swinging, like, in a good way. And like, but everyone's just dropping the ball that he's putting right in their hands. So I think lean on the ground game in this one and you have yourself a chance. But I do think I'm going to go advantage just Sean McVay on this one here. As a coach, I definitely trust Sean McVay more than Brian Callahan. The conversation surrounding why they chose not to challenge that one catch that was over by the sideline, where I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like an elbow that hit the ground, which elbow counts as 2 feet. And he did not believe that, and it doesn't sound like anyone in the Tennessee organization believes that. So as just like a pure coaching and also like quarterback matchup, 2 good defenses, I think I'm going to lean LA here, even if it is in Tennessee, but I do think they keep it close. I go Rams 21-14. Now we'll pivot. We'll go ahead. We'll take a look at Panthers and Cardinals. We'll get into the 4 o'clock window here. This could be another tough test for Carolina's ability to stop the run because they allowed 200 yards on the ground once again. Now, this is a common occurring theme for the Carolina Panthers dating back to basically all of last season through various stretches of the year. And Arizona has a proven running back, of course, in James Conner. Trey Benson had a good game last week, and Kyler Murray obviously can take off with the football. So that only adds to the pressure of defending the run that you're going to be dealing with. And this is going to be this will be a big test of just overall like discipline for the defensive front over there in Carolina. When I look at Arizona, protection issues against New Orleans last week definitely do have me a bit concerned. 5 sacks allowed, 10 pressures altogether. If you want to point a finger at Kyler Murray for a sack or 2, maybe a pressure or 2 here or there, like that's not the conversation I'm having, but I hear you. Carolina, though, only managed 6 pressures against Jacksonville last week. So, like, I'm not overly worried about it for Carolina's sake, but I mean, it is definitely something of note that clearly Arizona's offensive line may not quite be where it needs to be yet at this point. Obviously, plenty of time to correct that between now and later into the season, but just one of those things where it's like you want to see them get the ball out, get it out quick, get into the hands of like Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, those guys. Maybe it's James Conner coming out of the backfield, catching a pass, whatever it may be. Keep the ball moving, keep things quick. I do think that the Cardinals win this one, though. I especially feel better about it with this one happening in Arizona. That definitely really helps me lean towards the Cardinals for this. I'm concerned about the defense over there, and I mean, the offense as a whole, too, looked pretty flat as well, and I don't really think trading away, his name is slipping me right now, the receiver that they just sent over to Minnesota. I cannot believe I'm blanking on his name. Somebody feel free to call me out. Adam Thielen. Bought myself some time there. Adam Thielen. I don't think trading away Adam Thielen, somebody who Bryce Young had a good connection with, was probably the best move or interest in Bryce Young's development. So I'll take the Cardinals 24-16. Not a ton of points on this one here. It'll be just one of those games that, again, you see on Red Zone from time to time, but I don't feel like it's going to be getting a ton of love and attention, unfortunately. But give me Arizona. Now we'll flip our focus over to the Broncos and the Colts. Obviously, the Colts coming off of a crazy game where they just absolutely decimated Miami. I don't think anyone really saw that one coming out on just firing on all cylinders. And then Denver, of course, defensively choking out Tennessee to the finish line as the offense struggled to move the ball. Daniel Jones may have honestly just led the Colts to another scoring drive as I've been recording this. I mean, we might have to check the tape on that one, but it's impressive to me that Daniel Jones, of all people, became the first quarterback this century to lead his team to points on every single offensive drive in a game. That's pretty wild. So while Miami's defense was definitely questionable coming into the season, especially the secondary, that is not Denver's case. And Daniel Jones, listen, 272 yards, a touchdown, 76% completion rate. I will say this. Denver's defense has allowed more than 260 yards twice since the beginning of last season. The beginning of last season, not this season, mind you. Denver's also racked up 6 sacks and 17 pressures in one game already. That is twice as much or even 3 times as much, if not more, than some of the teams towards the bottom of the NFL. And they completely bottled up Tennessee's run game last week. There were also passes that I watched Daniel Jones throw that he airmailed. There was a few passes early on where I was like, oh my God, Daniel Jones experience, here we go in Indianapolis. And obviously things just went to hell in a handbasket for Miami and they took advantage. Good job. I don't envision the Colts' offensive output against the Denver Broncos defense. I would be legitimately shocked. On the flip side of things, I'm actually more interested in the Colts defense because what Lou Anarumo has done through the first week of the season, he's definitely made me believe. I will say the Colts defense the last handful of seasons has really thrown me for a loop, and I've just never really understood what they were trying to do there. And I didn't really know what to expect from Lou Anarumo this season, but how aggressive they were, getting after the football, basically just completely disrupting anything that Tua wanted to do in the passing game. Extremely impressive stuff. Bo Nix was not perfect last week. He had a couple of interceptions himself, so you are going into a situation now where Bo Nix, when he is, and he wasn't even really under too much pressure when he threw those couple of interceptions last week against Tennessee either, but it is a situation where Bo Nix, when you look at the numbers and you look at his career to this point, under pressure, things can get a little bit crazy, a little bit wonky. He can make a bad decision or two. He's young, obviously, very early in his career, so it happens. But I would anticipate that this is one of those just protect the football, don't make a mistake, and it might be defense versus defense here. And I actually think the points might be a little bit lower. I'm taking Denver on this one here. I would be hard-pressed to believe that the Colts are going to get this one done here. Now, it's in Indianapolis, so that could bode well for them, but I also think for Denver, that could bode well for them. So I like Denver here. A little bit lower scoring, 23-13. I think Colts offense comes back down to reality, but I do think that the Colts defense has another good showing and kind of shows everybody that, like, yeah, we're legit on this side of the football. But the Daniel Jones experience last week was crazy, but I'm not, I won't be fooled. I need to see it again. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I need to see it again. So Denver, 23-13. And then last game of the afternoon window before we jump into Sunday Night Football, we got ourselves the Super Bowl rematch between the Eagles and the Chiefs. An exciting, of course, Super Bowl rematch in Kansas City. This could be very interesting. It feels like it always gets interesting when it's in Kansas City. And it looks like Xavier Worthy, after being annihilated by Travis Kelce on crossing routes, it looks like he could be available. We'll see. Sounds like it's up in the air, though, and a potential possibility. Chiefs offense struggled to move, and I definitely think not having Xavier Worthy kind of blew a bit of a hole in their offensive game plan. I'm not saying that they absolutely beat the Chargers if Xavier Worthy doesn't go down, but I do think that there is a far better chance because Xavier Worthy is supposed to be a very big piece to this offense here. Philadelphia, for what it's worth, they allowed Dak to throw for 188 yards, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier talking about the Cowboys. If CeeDee Lamb doesn't drop a few passes, that number is significantly higher than that, and I think that we might even be having a conversation about the outcome, a different conversation, I should say, about the outcome of that football game. I am a bit concerned with how this offensive line in Kansas City holds up to Philadelphia. Jalen Carter was not available for the Philadelphia Eagles immediately following the start of that football game. So now he will be back in the fold. We'll see just how big of a presence he's actually going to be this year for this team. I expect Jalen Carter to be a dominant force, and he's going to test the interior of that O-line. So I definitely have concerns, and the offensive tackles did not look great for the Chiefs last week. So there's definitely there is real cause for concern here. On Philadelphia's end, I'll be curious to see how they challenge Kansas City on the ground. It was not the Saquon Barkley show that we were used to last season, even coming right out of the gates week 1 of last year. Saquon only ran for 60 yards on 18 carries. And you look at Omarion Hampton, Kansas City held him to 48 on 15 carries. So a good chunk of Philadelphia's production basically just came from Jalen Hurts. When you look back at the game and how everything played itself out, it was basically Jalen Hurts' show. So he was a big problem for them in the Super Bowl. He had 72 yards on the ground during that big game, and a lot of the success that Philadelphia had offensively came from him picking and choosing when he wanted to take off with the football or where he wanted to put it. And obviously Saquon Barkley doing his thing in that game as well. But this is one of those games where you hope that the rematch can be better than the initial matchup between these two in that Super Bowl from last year. And I know Philadelphia and Kansas City have been facing off for the better part of what feels like the last 5 years or so. They just, because they're the top teams in their division and they continually are number ones, they find themselves facing each other. But right now, as it stands, this one I feel like should be closer, but I do think Philadelphia still comes away with the win here. I'm hard pressed to believe that the Chiefs are built to beat this Philadelphia Eagles team, especially with Jalen Carter back in the fold for Philadelphia. The defensive front definitely missed Carter last week against Dallas. I don't think Dallas has as much success. I still think Dallas maybe finds some room to run the football, but it's probably not as good as it looked. I'll take Philadelphia. I have them 28-21, and just shockingly enough, an 0-2 start for the Kansas City Chiefs to kick things off after what was a 15-1 run for them last year. 15-2. Yeah, 15-1 because they lost the last game not starting anybody. So a 15-1 run last year turns into 2 losses to kick off the season. So pretty surprising stuff. They matched their loss total in the first 2 games of the season, if this is how things turn out. But give me the Eagles 28-21. And then last we got ourselves Sunday Night Football here. And again, we'll do Monday Night Football on Sunday. So be prepared for that. We'll have 2 games. There'll be a couple of videos on that. I'll dedicate 1 to each game. So make sure you keep your eyeballs peeled for that. Subscribe if you're not. J.J. McCarthy's second career start. Going to be in primetime again. ATL, not only bringing the pressure this week, but they've got to get home. They were able to do so last week against Baker Mayfield, and we saw some moments where that pressure got to Baker, but they were not getting home. You got to bring McCarthy down. You look at the way the game played out last week on Monday Night Football. J.J. McCarthy kept his composure, but Chicago was dominating up front for 3 quarters, and up until that very last quarter, it really felt like they just had him absolutely rattled. So I think if the Falcons can do something similar but get to the quarterback here, again, J.J. McCarthy's going in for his second start in the NFL. Yes, he showed a lot of great ability to push back against adversity when he was backed up against the wall in a really tough situation going into that fourth quarter, especially off that pick 6. When that happened, I was like, oh man, call this game here with the way the Vikings offense looked at that point in the game. So whether it's just dialing up extra pressure through the blitz or just defenders winning their one-on-ones on the defensive line, it's a young QB in his second start. It's basically his rookie season because he did not touch the football basically even through any of training camp of last year because he got hurt so early with the meniscus injury. So dial up that extra pressure, make him uncomfortable, force him into making a mistake. It's clear that you can. He showed that with the pick 6. If you can get that done, Atlanta has a good shot here, even being in Minnesota. On the flip side of things, I do want to see Atlanta be smart about how they attack this Vikings defense. Minnesota is extremely aggressive. They love to blitz. They're blitzing you, if not 30 to 35%. They can push even 40% or more of the time in a game. And listen, you have the talent in Atlanta to have a very explosive offense. Michael Penix is still young. He hasn't even started a full season's worth of games yet. And I think as the season rolls on, we're going to see this offense get better and better. Things looked really good to kick things off for Atlanta last week, and then it was a bit of a grind to work your way through. So the way I see it now, if Darnell Mooney is able to play, if Drake London is able to play, and those are 2 things that really concern me right now about just their overall health and availability for this game, plus Bijan Robinson, plus Kyle Pitts, if you can keep the passing game quick, running the football, definitely a challenge. Minnesota, one of the best run defenses in the NFL last season, and could potentially be that again this year with how good that defensive front already looks coming out of the gate week 1. Keep the passing game quick and simple for your young quarterback. I cannot preach that enough. I feel like I probably said that 2 or 3 times already in this, and that's because it rings true for these young quarterbacks. Don't force them to have to think too much. Get the ball out of their hands, get it into your playmakers, and when I look at Atlanta's offense, you're going up against a very aggressive Vikings defense that can be prone to letting people get by them because of how aggressive they are. The more guys you send after the quarterback, the more openings there will be to get the football out. If you can identify those quickly and put the receivers in positions where Michael Penix is getting the ball 2-3 seconds at most, not even, and you're getting the football out of his hands, you can find yourself in a good spot. That being said, though, I am actually leaning the Minnesota Vikings in this one here. I probably sounded like I was leaning into Atlanta on that one by design for fun here, but I do actually think I'm going to take Minnesota on this one here. I think the homecoming coming off of a Monday Night Football clash the way they did is going to be a lot, And I think J.J. McCarthy is probably feeling really good about himself right now, that he's going to play with a little extra confidence. Hopefully it's not too much confidence that it turns into just like overconfidence and then you're making even more mistakes. But there's a lot of talent on that offense over there in Minnesota as well. And I really like the way this Vikings defense is currently built. I love the aggressive play style that they have. And it's one of those things where I think it could potentially get the better of Michael Penix, who again is still working through his own first season's worth of games at this point. Yes, it's his second year, but he does not have a full season of starts under his belt yet. I could see Brian Flores trying to make it a very long day in game for Michael Penix. So I like the Vikings 24-23 to get the job done there. But those are my predictions for week number 2 of the NFL's Sundays games. Again, we already picked for Thursday. We took the L on that one. I'll be predicting the Monday night games on Sunday, so make sure your eyes are peeled for that. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Comment down below your predictions, your thoughts on the games, anything else you might want to add. These are all just quick breakdowns of all the games here. But as always, appreciate it if you made it to the end. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.